Tragedy in Washington, D.C. We'll hear from someone who was at the event where Sarah Milgram and Yaron Leshinsky were murdered. Then we'll have a security briefing with one of Israel's leading experts in national security and geopolitics, Colonel Miri Eisin, and hear from a unique voice online combating the misconceptions about Israel, the Syrian-born Rawan Osman. From the Stand With Us studios in Jerusalem, I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Special Briefing. Shalom from Israel. Over 50,000 of you watched last week's show, and we're streaming on Stand With Us YouTube, Facebook, and X, and as a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. In a moment, the headlines. But first, Sarah Milgram and Yaron Leshinsky were young adults working with dignity and a sense of purpose in Washington, D.C., a city that should represent safety and dialogue. Instead, they were murdered in cold blood, massacred, not by random violence, but in the name of Free Palestine. Let's be clear, this was an anti-Semitic act of domestic terrorism. Yaron was planning to propose to Sarah in Jerusalem this week. Instead, their lives were stolen by hatred. They were murdered outside an AJC event featuring speakers from Multi-Faith Alliance and Israel Aid, two vital organizations providing life-saving aid to civilians in Gaza and other parts of the Middle East. Tragically, none of that mattered to the terrorist who shouted Free Palestine and Intifada Revolution after murdering Sarah and Yaron. The killer had been part of extremist groups that glorified the genocidal atrocities that Hamas committed on October 7, 2023. Intifada means terrorism. It means suicide bombings, stabbings, rockets, and now it means the murder of two innocent young people on American soil. The truth is that the anti-Israel campaign has always been synonymous with violence. They're not pro-peace. Free Palestine activists bring division, death, and destruction to societies the world over, even those that pander to them. Tragically, there is always bloodshed. One of Yaron's last posts warned about the blood libels being spread about Israel, grotesque lies that incite violence. We saw so many of these being amplified in the media and social media. And then Yaron became a victim of the very hate he tried to expose. To the politicians and influencers who give voice to these lies, who chant globalize the Intifada, who falsely accuse Israel of genocide, you don't get to mourn Sarah and Yaron. You're not innocent. Your rhetoric helped pave the way for this horror. And to the media outlets that excuse or sanitize this hate, you're not bystanders. You are enablers. Lies and hate are dangerous, and education can be the difference between life and death. Now more than ever, we must work together to counter misinformation and educate the people around us. The world must choose: stand against terrorism and extremism and the anti-Semitism of the anti-Israel mob, or stand aside and let hatred fester. We saw the results of doing nothing: blood on the streets. In a sick manifesto posted on social media, the murderer repeated propaganda that we see every day in our social media feeds, universities, and even K-12 schools. Now more than ever, we must work together to counter misinformation and educate the people around us. We say their names with broken hearts and unwavering resolve. Sarah Milgram, Yaron Leshinsky. May their memories be a blessing. May their names be a warning. And may their deaths not be in vain. We're now joined by someone who was at the event in Washington, D.C. Tell us what it was like for you.
My name is Lilia. I used to work at Stand With Us. It'll always have a very special place in my heart. And I was at Wednesday evening's event in D.C. that ended in tragedy. My friends and I attended this event. One of them actually organized it because we care deeply about humanitarian aid, about peace building, about coexistence, which was what the event was all about. And we were all there and just really so moved by how hopeful we felt there, listening to these humanitarian aid organizations talk about their work since the Hamas massacre of October 7th, 2023, in Israel and in Gaza, just trying to help civilians live better lives and heal from everything that's been happening since Hamas instigated those attacks. Now, after the panel discussions with these humanitarian aid organizations, I ended up speaking with Yaron for quite a while. one of the victims. He was such a beautiful person. I went up to him because I was just drawn to his demeanor. He was so kind and just felt so inviting. And we spoke for a while about many things. And I was just struck by what a good, kind, genuine person he was and how mission driven he was. And I saw him with Sarah as well, beautiful Sarah. And she had a magnetic smile that I complimented. And I left the events a few minutes early. I waved goodbye to Yaron as I stepped out and said goodbye to my friends. And I thought to myself as I exited the building, wow, I made a couple new friends tonight, thinking of Yaron and Sarah. And I went home and my friends stayed behind. And a few minutes later, tragedy struck. Many of my friends interacted with the terrorist, thinking that he was just another attendee. They tried to help him. They asked if he was okay until he pulled out a keffiyeh and started shouting that he did it for Gaza and free Palestine and all of these things that were so ironic because the entire event had been about helping Palestinians in Gaza.
Lilia, how are you and your friends doing?
You know, my friends and I have been feeling a lot of things after what happened, from anger to sadness to grief. But the number one thing that I think we're all feeling is just this deep admiration of the Jewish people and how resilient we are. You know, we've just been checking in on each other constantly and sharing the story of what happened. And I think what's important to remember and note is that this is an example of the fact that when they choose death and violence and destruction, we choose life and rebuilding, and we choose positivity and we choose peace. And I am committed to embodying the spirit of Yaron and of Sarah and continue to pursue peace in whatever way I can and try to make the world a better place. And I know my friends are committed to doing the same, and we will not let them die in vain.
Lilia, I'm so sorry that you experienced this and hope to see you next under better circumstances. Thank you very much. In a moment, our security briefing, but first the news headlines from last week at war. Mia Shem, who survived 50 days in Hamas captivity, walked the Cannes red carpet wearing a yellow hostage pin to highlight the 58 hostages still held in Gaza. A different ribbon she intended to wear was removed by festival management. New reports indicate progress in efforts to secure the release of Elizabeth Surkov, an Israeli-Russian academic who was conducting research on Middle Eastern affairs in Iraq when she was kidnapped in March 2023. A Shiite militia group widely recognized as Iranian proxy is believed to be responsible. The family of Tseila Gez, a pregnant Israeli woman who was brutally murdered in a terrorist shooting attack while in labor on May 14th, has donated Tseila's corneas, continuing her legacy of giving to others. Her baby was delivered and continues to be in serious but stable condition. Reports indicate that Israeli sources believe there is an increased likelihood that US-Iran nuclear deal negotiations could fail. In the event of such a failure, Israel is reportedly preparing a series of strikes on Iran nuclear sites, which pose a continued threat to Israel and global security as a whole. Red alert sirens sounded across the Jerusalem region due to a missile launched by Houthis from Yemen. It was successfully intercepted. Since the IDF renewed its ground operation against Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis have continued to escalate their missile strikes on Israel. Joining us now is one of Israel's leading voices in national security, intelligence, and strategic communication. She brings decades of experience in understanding the complex realities Israel faces, from military threats to global diplomacy. She's also a trusted educator who helps audiences around the world understand the Middle East and Israel's role in it. Please welcome Colonel Miri Eisin. Miri, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And we spoke at the top of the show about the terrible attack in Washington, D.C. What's your take on what happened in the nation's capital?
I'm looking at the aspect of how rhetoric becomes extreme, how extremism is exactly what leads to terrorism, and how almost nobody is calling it out as a terror attack. There are a lot of different words that are used for it, and I'm disturbed mainly by that. I'm noticing that instead of highlighting the hate, the Judaism, the site itself, it's not like he knew who they were. It's being focused on 2 Israeli employees. I'm like, these are different aspects which just show that it's going to get worse, not better, at least as of now. The framing of it, both in the United States and around the world, is something that's really disturbing.
We know that the murderer, the terrorist, had a vast history of speaking out against Israel, very radical rhetoric, involved with radical organizations. What should we read into that?
We're on social media right now, probably most people who are watching us. So is he. It's kind of textbook extremism. It's the one who took all of those different ideas and took them to violence and then thought that violence against people, human beings, citizens that he called Jews, Israelis, that's okay. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. And that extreme kind of action inside social media, that's how you recruit people. It's not just how you recruit young people in the United States of America, Michael, it's how they recruited people into the Islamic State. It's the exact same thing.
Very, very worrying, particularly in America and in Western countries. You know, we began this show on the second day of war. We are now approaching 600 days of war. Take Israel's pulse, if you will, as we approach this grim milestone.
First of all of us are surprised, in awe, resilience versus, oh my God, what is going on? The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, have been fighting on so many different fronts. That's the warfare. I think that in those different fronts, we're doing very well on the Lebanese or in the Syrian against Hezbollah, against those different forces. We've been certainly doing a lot when it comes to the Islamic regime of Iran, the Houthis. When it comes to Hamas and the Gaza Strip, that's a challenge militarily. But in all of the different fronts, I think it's what we're sitting here right now after 600 days, almost 600 days, that I feel the worst about. And that's that in the international front, I could never have thought on the second day that Israel would be vilified, sidelined on the most extreme type that we've ever seen after, a year and 8 months of war.
Let's talk about those two front lines, the battlefield in Gaza first. We saw an intensification of the IDF campaign in Gaza. Why now?
Because you're not going to allow Hamas to define the rules of the game. And Hamas very much wants to do so. Because we need to highlight the difference. And it's a harsh one. And I'll talk about that a bit after. It's a harsh one between the civilians who suffer in the Gaza Strip. Let's not ignore that. And between Hamas, who are Palestinian, who rule the Gaza Strip and are trying to hide behind that civilian front. We need to make sure that Hamas does not define the rules of the game, that they don't portray themselves as the victims, as the Palestinians in that sense. Yes, they're Palestinians. They're not the victims. They're not just the perpetrator. They prepared this years in advance to be able to have their own longevity in being able to withstand Israel. So what we're doing is continuing to attack, same. We're attacking the weapons that they're making, the different cache of weapons, that underground system where we've done a lot, but a lot is very little compared to what they prepared in 20 years.
We had Colonel Richard Kemp on the show last week. We spoke about the fact that wars are long. Wars take time. People don't seem to have time, and there's patience running out in the West, perhaps, towards Israel. What do we need to know about how long this war might take and why?
I'm going to say, sadly, that I still think that we're in it. I don't think that 2025 is necessarily when it's going to be done. But let's say that right now we're at semi-high intensity in the Gaza Strip. But in the other fronts, you're not seeing that same type of intensity. Here it's about the balance also of a country. I think that we have to breathe in deep. There is no easy fix for what Hamas built in the Gaza Strip. There is no easy way to bring back 58 hostages that are inside the Gaza Strip. There is no easy way. That means we need resilience, but we also need to be aware that when we want to get back those hostages, we have to pay a price. And that seems impossible. How can we be paying more of a price? But that's exactly what Hamas did. They prepared it in such a way that if we want to get them back, we're going to have to pay a price. And inside that balance, I breathe in deep. I look at us and I say, we're here. We're not going anywhere. We have amazing resilience. But we also have to breathe in deep and continue to be. If we all wallow just in the issue of the hostages, that's not going to help us. If we all look at the war as being something that if I just do a little bit more and I hit from there and I attack from there, then that will make them break, I am sad to say that's not going to happen either. So you have to continue and make sure that Hamas does not define the rules of the game, but you need to be aware that that doesn't mean that you're actually going to erase Hamas without erasing all of the Gaza Strip.
And despair is not a strategy.
I want to say that all of us get there, and I think we should acknowledge it. Okay, we have days of despair. I think that last Thursday was a day of despair, more as somebody who was born in the United States. The fact that there was a specific type of terror one like that, then I thought, sadly, over the last few years, we've seen more and more in the United States that's focused against Jews, Israelis, Zionists, because they're all the same for them. But here we are, and I'm standing strong. As you know, Michael, my entire family serves. And I say that it's not just about resilience, it's about serving and knowing that this is something that we can withstand. We're going to still be here, and we're going to have our kids here, and their kids are going to have their kids here. We still have a long way to go.
Let's talk about the international pressure, the diplomatic pressure placed on Israel this week, particularly from the UK, from France and Canada. What result does that have?
What it has is it makes the voices who talk, and I'm going to call it a language, humanitarian, much stronger. We in Israel, Colonel Kemp, we talk security. Those are two different languages. It's two different ways of looking at this war, and we usually talk here and talk a lot of security. We don't necessarily talk humanitarian. I think you actually have to talk both languages, meaning let's acknowledge not some, but the pain that's coming out of what those three leaders are saying. And as I listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu and him talking about their being on the wrong side of history, it's looking at the war through the eyes of victims. It is a way to look at the war. I don't go there, but I understand that. We also talk about our victims. And in that sense, as I look at that right now, how can it be again that we're in a place where our close allies, I have to say, it's not like the United States of America is calling out on our side right now, so that when we talk about the United Kingdom and about France and about Canada, that's worrying, and we need to listen and not just block them off.
Let me ask you about the Iranian talks with the U.S. They had the 5th round of talks happen in Rome this week. How's Israel looking at those talks?
You see, Iran has been very careful. They only threaten us. I want to remind all of our viewers right now that Iran calls us the little devil. The big devil is the United States of America, Western values in general. Iran wants to not just achieve nuclear weapons, it wants to keep the capabilities that they've already built. They are masters of the negotiations. This is the 5th round. They'd like the 6th round and then the 7th round. Oh, the 8th round and the 9th round, that for Iran is basically taking it out, the Islamic regime, and making sure that in the meantime, they're keeping their capabilities. The entire international community and Israel as well do not want a war. But what that also means, if I go back to my security and humanitarian, is looking at if Iran goes nuclear, oh my God, that changes the world. And I think that Israel in that sense is going, what happens if the talks keep on going and go nowhere? Because if these talks arrive at a resolution, you and I are both going to enjoy that. But I don't see any resolution in the offing, which is one that we can actually swallow. And that brings us to a harsh reality. Will we or won't we attack? I don't know. But I absolutely think that we're talking about that right now.
And meanwhile, Iran continues to fund the Houthis, continuous ballistic missile attacks on Israel, even this morning, even on your way to the studio. What do we expect to that?
The continuation of the Houthis attacking. What Iran did, the Islamic regime, with the Houthis, very similar to Hezbollah, is not only did they supply the weapons and the ideology and the know-how, they also supply the physical material so the Houthis can make their own. We look at Yemen in a lot of different ways. It's a large country, 34 million people. It's not so small. It is the worst country on earth, according to the United Nations, when it comes to every single type of thing you can think of. Let's put starvation amongst other ones. But again, who looks right now at Yemen in that way?
Seen any protests about that?
And when I look at it, because every Friday, and this is from October of 2023, and as we said, we're almost edging up to that 600th day, the Houthis in Sana'a, in their main city, have done really big demonstrations, which they like to photograph. And in it, they have, I would say, 2 main elements. One is the Palestinian flag. Yeah, nice, okay. And the other is the Houthi flag. And anytime we look at that, we always have to remind everybody, go look at the Houthi flag. It's very clear in what it says. Yes, we have to expect them to continuing it. What amazes me is how everybody, again, it's convenient for them to say, oh, this is about Israel. And I'm like, really? That's where we're at right now? The Houthis have closed a main shipping route for the entire world. They've hit the Egyptian economy horrifically, but it's about Israel. Oh, if we just weren't here, that's me being sarcastic. Are we allowed to be sarcastic? Okay. If we weren't here, all of the issues would be resolved. Hamas would not be what Hamas is. The Houthis would not be who the Houthis are. They'd open up the shipping. Everything would be good. Hey, Michael, let's leave. I'm sorry, that was me being very sarcastic.
That's all right, and we're not going to. I'll reassure our viewers that
we're not leaving. Let's go back to before. We're here. Our children are here. Our grandchildren will be here. Emil Hashem. Everything is going to continue as we want.
A final word. You're somebody who's been on the TV screens through multiple conflicts, been the face of Israel. certainly. What do you think Israel should be getting across in terms of its messaging right now to the world?
That we have a heart. We lost our heart in the world. And I say that to every single one of us. No buts. Stand strongly and say, it is horrible when innocent people die in the world. And don't say, but they're not innocent. It's horrible when children die. And don't say, but it's the Hamas's fault. Just have a heart. After that, make your point.
Sounds good. And let me ask you finally, if you don't mind, to turn to our Stand With Us audience watching right now and just give them a message following this distressing week in the United States, tough situation here in Israel. What's your message, if you could turn to our camera here, to our audience?
We all are still standing together. It's not just stand with us. It's standing side by side. I feel stronger knowing that this audience outside is listening to us. We listen to each other. As we grow, as we talk, let's make sure we don't close any doors. We're growing, we're talking, we're strong here. You're strong with us. But together, we're going to get through this, even if it takes another year.
It's a great message. Colonel Miri Eisin, thank you for your service. Thank you for your family service. May they all be safe. And thank you for always being there for us, speaking to our audiences, and in giving your insight to us. We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now let's bring in our next guest today. She's a Syrian-born activist advocating normalization with Israel and a prominent voice for truth, followed by tens of thousands across social media for her courageous commentary. Joining us now here in the studio is Rawan Osman. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And tell us how you ended up here. We're in Jerusalem. You started life in Syria. You moved on to Lebanon. How did that journey begin?
Well, I'm blessed because I do have an unusual story, because I grew up on the other side of the fence. And my father is Syrian, my mom is Lebanese. I grew up in Lebanon through several wars between Lebanon and Israel, or Hezbollah and Israel. And I hated the Jews. I believed the narrative I was told, especially that the narrative, Michael, was consistent. All the intelligent people around me as I grew up, by that I mean my parents, my teachers, the clever ones you see on TV, the politicians, the journalists, those who write in the newspaper, told us that Israel is the enemy. And the Jews, it is in their nature. They love killing babies. They target civilians because they only care about one another. And they don't mind even sacrificing their own. This is why they sacrificed a few Jews, and they told a lie about the Holocaust. They sacrificed some of their own in order to come to the Middle East and steal Palestine. I grew up fond of Hezbollah. Can you imagine this? And I say it not because I'm proud, but if we're going to cure a disease, we must have the right diagnosis. I am a recovered anti-Semite, like many of my family members until this day, and my friends in progressive Lebanon, people who blocked me on October 8th for stating publicly that I stand with Israel. That is not because the Israeli government pays me millions to advocate for them, but because I stand with Israel and with what Israel represents against what Hamas represents, not only in our region, but in the world.
So what was your reaction on October the 2nd?
I always said that anti-Semitism is rampant in the Arab world. It's been many years, maybe 14, 15 that I live in Europe. And the Europeans are preoccupied still with anti-Semitism in Europe. And nobody addresses, especially in academia, we don't have data about anti-Semitism in the Arab world because it is denied. They always speak about anti-Zionism. We are opposed to Israel's existence. We have no problem with the Jews. It's despite the fact that more than 800,000 Jews were uprooted from this Arab world. People thought I'm being melodramatic because it is in our nature coming from the Middle East. Until October 7th, until I realized that even I, who thought I had the sense of urgency others lacked, I underestimated how bad the problem is. I had never imagined, I'm a Syrian. I'm going to say this carefully. On October 7th, I've never imagined witnessing something worse than what we've watched ISIS do. Why? I'm not relativizing, but even ISIS, when they decapitated people, filmed it and shared it, they weren't rejoicing in the background. I volunteered to translate the videos filmed and shared by Hamas from Arabic to English. And I've seen it all. And I've seen people happy, celebrating, moved to tears because they have Jewish blood on their hands. This is not a healthy society.
So given this situation, you witnessed everything that happens on October the 7th. And then what was your reaction to the global reaction, both in the Arab world, but in the West as well, critically, to what happened on October the 7th?
At least in the West, at the beginning, global sympathy was aroused by what they've witnessed, which is a tiny, tiny bit of what Hamas committed. But that changed quickly because Israel had to respond. Hamas knew that it was inevitable. And Hamas officials shared that, especially in the Arab world, when they spoke publicly about being prepared even to die in order to liberate Palestine from the Jews. So things turned, which is absurd. Did you know that the first encampment in the USA happened on October the 8th, one day after the attack? 2 weeks before Israel responded? That was shocking. When I tried to analyze Hamas's self-representation in the media after October 7th, I was shocked. They were prepared. The war we're fighting on social media, that is often underestimated, is probably worse than the war fought in Gaza. It's not costing us lives, but the campaign against Israel is winning big time because people respond emotionally. They see horrific footage coming out of Gaza, and we are both parents, Michael. One child dead in Gaza is one too many. Who chooses war? Hamas did. They were willing to sacrifice their own people, their family members. And the world was blinded to that. Until now, people don't understand that this is the strategy. They're playing chess, they were prepared, and they are benefiting from every death in Gaza. I am surprised because many so-called experts in the West know that Israel has no alternative. Many were pressured, asked, what do you suggest? Please share, give us your magic solution, other than war. While we sit here in Jerusalem, 58 hostages or prisoners of the war, as Hamas likes to call them, and many media outlets in the West are following and adopting that narrative. Many remain there. They have families as well, and the Israeli government is responsible for their return to Israel, whether they're dead or alive.
So let me ask you, how do we cultivate more voices like your own? You're somebody who chose to step forward and be outspoken in your views. Are there more like you? And if not, then how do we create them?
Definitely, Michael, because women and children and minorities, the other, the different, is abused in the Arab world. There are good models, good examples such as the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Morocco, and there are voices there who agree with me, who dare say it publicly. But there are voices also in Iraq and Egypt, in Lebanon and Syria, where I grew up, people I know who changed their minds, meanwhile, because they know the enemy we are facing. Hamas is an Islamist terrorist organization. They built more than 500 kilometers of networks of a tunnel network underground, and they did not build a single shelter. They did not offer to shield their own families and children in the tunnels they are using to hide the hostages. What does that say about them? And it is not only about Hamas. It's about the alliance Hamas is part of, this axis of resistance, the axis of evil led by the Islamic Republic in Iran. So we suffer collectively in the Middle East. And those who dare think, use their brains, know that we have a common enemy. And I did not feel the need to be outspoken, to show my face and be on social media before October 7th. It is the outrage I feel as a woman, as a mother, that made me become the accidental activist, and I'm not unique. There are prominent Arab voices, Muslims and non-Muslims, who said, until here and stop. Also in Israel, Druze Arabs or Muslims or Bedouins who identify as proud Israelis. Because let's not forget that Hamas did not spare anyone. My first visit to Israel, this is my 10th since October 7th. On my first visit, I met the two Bedouins who were kidnapped into Gaza, Aisha and Bilal Ziadni. And Aisha was a minor. She was 17 when she was kidnapped, wearing a headscarf. I saw her with my own eyes. You cannot claim that you mistook her for a Jewish Israeli soldier. They spared nobody, and they killed many Muslims and Bedouins and Christians. They did not stop to ask, are you Jewish or not? They wanted to kill any Israeli.
In a post-October the 7th world, what is the ideal approach that the West takes towards radical Islamic theology?
I don't think the West found the solution yet, because I live in Europe, and I've seen the continent transform in the past decade. France has been through a lot of shocks. Let's think about the Bataclan for a second, or the Nice, where on the promenade a lorry killed more than 80 people. Brussels and the UK, they had to deal with terrorism, with ISIS, with Al-Qaeda, so did the USA. And until now, did we eradicate jihadist terrorists? We still have to deal with them, including in our region. A version is Hamas, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and many armed factions in Syria. The West has to send a clear message. We had enough. Jihadists are threatening human civilization. The Western civilization is not perfect. There is room for improvement. Of course there is. Is Israel perfect? Of course not. But this is what we achieved collectively. And we have to improve, not destroy it. We cannot go back to the 7th century. And I say this as a woman who lived, grew up in the Arab world. And I know that we have to move forward. We need to move forward. Because in the region, in the so-called Arab world and the Muslim world, a lot of people suffer and they immigrate. Where do they go to? To the West. So it cannot be that the solution is bringing the West down, what al-Houthis vowed to do, or the Islamic Republic in Iran. Destroying Israel and the Western civilization is not what we need. And this seems so simple and obvious, but the West at the moment is working to achieve the goals of terror organizations such as Hamas, where lawyers are proud of representing Hamas and trying to remove them from
terror watch lists, for instance, like what's happening in the UK right now.
And they think they're doing Europe a favor.
Yeah. You've amassed such a big audience, including many young people. People nowadays are getting their news from a diversity of sources, some of it more accurate, some of it less. What's your message, particularly to a younger audience, about how they consume news from Israel and this region?
This is a very, very important question, and it's very tricky. Indeed, more and more people read their news on social media. So it's concise, very short, without checking the sources. Some people learn about what's happening in the world on TikTok. The attention span of the future generations is getting shorter and shorter. This is very dangerous because they believe whatever is the mainstream, told in the mainstream. And the mainstream at the moment is against Israel. We don't have a lot of friends. And I say we not because I'm Israeli, but because I am part of this pro-Israel camp. What we need to do is teach our children the same way you give them a phone, you give them access to internet. We have to teach them to deal with the internet with critical thinking, scrutinize the information you receive, and be active. Do not, however, do not share something you're not certain of. For many weeks, I did not comment on the developments in Syria when I heard about the massacres happening on the coast, because I was myself very confused. And I had contacts on the ground in Syria who were sending me contradictory statements, events, videos. So it takes a lot of time to understand, to filter out what is the truth. And you have to post or make a statement, especially if you have a following, and bear in mind that this has consequences because people will reshare it and it will snowball. So it is our responsibility, I think, as parents, when we give our children access to the internet. The youngsters, we can only reach out when we address them on our platforms, whether on Instagram or X or TikTok, and tell them, I cannot force you to believe what I'm telling you. I'm sharing my experience. I come to Israel, and after 10 times, I'm telling you, your impression is wrong. Israel is not an apartheid. People here speak Arabic even, and this shocks the Arab world because the Israeli narrative is omitted from our existence, from their existence still, but social media gave them access to what's happening in Israel. If they're interested in seeing how Muslims are treated here, the Druze, the others, whether you're homosexual or religious, nobody discriminates against you just because you are different. And we see people give absurd statements to Al Jazeera claiming Israel is not a democracy while they are criticizing the government from Tel Aviv or Jerusalem.
Now, we spoke about your story beginning in Syria, growing up in Lebanon, but it's about to continue in Israel. Tell us more.
So I plan to move to Israel in July, Bezrat Hashem.
It's a big step.
It is a big step, especially during the war, but I think it's necessary to signal to the Israelis that I do stand by your side and that I'm proud of what I'm doing because I do believe with all my heart that I'm doing the right thing. And I took it a bit further, and this is a gift for myself. I am converting to Judaism, and guess what, Michael? When we check our DNA in this region, many of us happen to have Jewish blood because we have hybrid identity, because our region is Islamized, Arabized, so we have this beautiful and abundant cultural heritage. Now, I'm embracing this part of my identity because home is here for me, because Judaism appealed to me. The universal morality and the realism I found in Judaism offered me a haven. And I cannot be more grateful for this gift bestowed upon me. And if this reassures the Israelis that you do have true friends outside Israel, not everyone can afford being vocal for many reasons, sometimes professionally or personally, and not everyone has the thick skin necessary to deal with social media, but you do have a lot of people who think you are fighting to bring a light onto nations. Some Jews even forget that you do have a mission, and when you have purpose for yourself and a mission, a sense of responsibility for your community, then you have a cause. And this is what the world doesn't understand. The cause of the Jewish people is part of their purpose and their mission. This is why this country came to existence, and this is why this country is here to stay.
Well, we thank you for your courageous and your outspoken voice, and we couldn't be prouder to be about to welcome you into the tribe. Rawan Osman, thanks so much for joining us.
Toda.
Don't forget, if you enjoy our live shows and want to be kept up to speed with all that's happening in Israel, be sure to click on the subscribe button on YouTube or follow us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Before we go, if you'd like to join our efforts, you can do something amazing today. Go to standwithus.com/donate to support our work. Thank you very much. We're sending love to the Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters and allies worldwide, and our prayers for every hostage to be back home with their families very soon. Together, we will prevail. Thanks for watching. I'm Yisrael Chai.